There are moments in the long night of Imperium when even a transhuman heart seems to hesitate, as though some ancient instinct tries to recall what it once felt like to be merely human. I have lived through centuries of war, walked across worlds drowned in ash, and watched the light of dying suns stain the armor of brothers who will never rise again. Yet there are mornings when the quiet before the next bombardment feels heavier than any battlefield. The chapter will always tell you that a space marine knows no fear, no doubt, no longing, but the truth is more complex, hidden beneath layers of duty and sacred conditioning. We are built to endure, but endurance does not erase memory. We remember the taste of recycled air in the barracks, the metallic tang of a helm freshly sealed, the faint hum of the power plant that reverberates through bone and ceramite alike. We remember the weight of expectation pressing against our shoulders long before the first bolt is ever fired. And in those memories, in the cracks where silence gathers, you may find the closest thing to what life is like for one of us, the so-called average Astartes, if such a thing can be said to exist. If you wish to understand us, you must begin in that quiet space, where the war has not yet screamed its demands and the galaxy still pretends to hold its breath. If these whispered moments between battles draw you deeper into our world, then let your support be felt as strongly as the march of ceramite on steel. Lend your voice, like, share, subscribe, and stand with us as we descend further into the lives forged in service to the Imperium. Every brotherhood is strengthened by those who choose to walk beside it. Chapter 1. The Weight of Awakening. The first sensation is always the hum, low, steady, and older than any living brother in the fortress-monastery. It vibrates through the stone floors, through the adamantine pillars etched with the names of long-dead heroes, through the very slabs upon which we rest in our armored alcoves. It is the voice of the chapter's heart, a sound I grew so accustomed to that when I first heard true silence on a distant battlefield, it felt like standing atop the cracked husk of a dead world. But here, in the pre-dawn dim, the hum returns as it always does, reminding me that I am home, even if the word has long since lost the warmth it once carried. My eyes open before the wake chant echoes through the hall. Pre-dawn light filters through stained-glass depictions of the Emperor's triumphs, casting colored shards across rows of armored figures rising in unison. The sense of sacred lubricant, polished ceramite, and persistent promethium residue cling to everything like a second skin. I feel the internal systems of my armor whisper to life as I step off a slab, each movement guided not by thought, but by instinct layered through years of conditioning. Brothers move around me, their steps precise, their expressions unreadable behind the weight of discipline. No one speaks yet. Words at this hour feel like something fragile, too easily broken. I have heard it said that Astartes do not dream. That is almost true. What we experience in the final moments of rest are less dreams and more echoes, fragments of memory and sensation that surface unbidden. This morning it was the scent of burning snow on a world whose name I can no longer recall. A battle fought centuries ago, a victory purchased with too many brothers left unburied beneath drifts of ash. Such memories surface without warning, reminders that even we are not entirely beyond the reach of what we have lived through. I do not dwell on them. Dwelling is a luxury belonging to the unburdened. I move to the cleansing chamber, where the cold bite of recycled water sluices across my skin. The scars that web my torso catch the light, relics of battles I should not have survived, each one a testament to the Emperor's will rather than my own endurance. Nearby, Brother Varen recites the opening lines of the Catechism of Steel under his breath. His voice is steady, unwavering, even as he scrapes battlefield grime from the seams of his armor. The words are familiar, etched into all of us from the moment we first accepted the implantations that would transform us into something beyond human. I join him, not out of piety, but out of rhythm. The chant aligns the mind. It seals away doubt. It reminds us that every breath taken is a debt owed to duty. By the time we enter the armory, the fortress has begun to wake in full. Servitors glide along rails overhead, their mechanical limbs carrying racks of bolt rifles like offerings at an altar. The red glow of data slates illuminates the faces of tech marines as they perform their ritual inspections, murmuring Benharic litanies that vibrate through the skull more than the ears. I step forward when my name is invoked, presenting my armor with the reverence taught to us from childhood. The Techmarine's mechadendrite brushes across a worn scar in the plate near my abdomen, a memory etched into ceramite, the mark of a blade wielded by a Xenos whose species no longer exists. He pauses, as he always does, but says nothing. Some wounds in armor are allowed to remain as reminders of lessons paid in blood. When I seal my helm, the world narrows into a tunnel of controlled breath and data feeds scrolling across my visor. A moment of stillness settles in my chest, as though the armor itself exhales around me. I feel heavier, grounded, purposeful. This weight is not a burden. It is a promise. The Vox grill crackles to life, and for the first time since waking, a voice breaks the quiet. Squad Primus, report to the reclusium. The words carry no urgency, yet something inside me stirs. A faint tightening, a subtle shift. The reclusium is rarely visited without reason. It is a place for prayer, for reflection, for reminders of mortality and oath, for summons that change the shape of days. We march through the corridor, past statues of heroes whose deeds shaped centuries. Their stone eyes follow us, or so it has always seemed. Perhaps it is only my imagination, but imagination is a rare guest in the mind of an Astartes. When it arrives, I pay attention. Today feels heavier than most, as though the fortress itself is holding its breath, as though something waits beyond the next set of doors. The doors of the reclusium part with a slow mechanical groan, their weight a reminder of the centuries they have guarded this chamber. The scent of incense rolls out in thick waves, clinging to the inside of my helm filters, with a faint, metallic sweetness. Rows of purity seals and hanging relics stir in the air as we step inside, each parchment strip whispering fragments of scripture that only the chaplains fully understand. The chamber is dim except for the flickering candles embedded in wrought iron braziers lining the walls. Their flames dance against the statues of our Primarch and the Emperor, their shadows long and restless across the carved stone floor. Chaplain Rail stands before us, a looming figure of black armor etched with sigils that pulse with a faint internal glow. His crozius is anchored at his side, the winged skull gleaming with a polished ferocity that suggests it has been tended with reverence only hours before. His helm remains sealed, its skull visage fixed upon us with the same intensity it has held since the first day I saw him preside over the trials of the neophytes. Brothers, his voice booms through the Vox, deep enough to rattle the bones beneath my armor. Today you rise not to answer a call of war, but a call of remembrance. Remembrance. The word lands strangely. We are warriors shaped by memory, yet we rarely pause to acknowledge it. The chaplain gestures, and the great doors behind us seal shut with a finality that resonates through the hall. A hololithic display ignites in the center of the chamber, swirling with static before stabilizing into the image of a world ravaged by siege. Mountain ranges cracked open like bones split from marrow. Manufactorum towers collapsing in slow ruin beneath drifting clouds of smoke. I recognize the world instantly. Vordran, a grim name spoken only in rituals of loss. 10 years have passed since the fall of Vordran. Rail continues. 10 years since the sacrifice of Captain Mathon and the entire Templar cohort. Their deeds echo in the honor rolls, but honor owed must be honored lived. I feel Varen shift slightly beside me. He served under Mathon before my time, and though the Gene Siege stripped much from our past, some bonds refuse to fade even after the body becomes something more than human. We carry their legacy because they carried ours, the chaplain says, stepping toward us. And today, Squad Primus shall bear the reliquary standard in the vigil of iron. A ripple moves through my brothers, not surprise, exactly, but a tightening of focus. The vigil is performed only once in a decade. To be chosen is more burden than honor. It means a day of introspection, a day of confronting truths we often bury beneath the crush of duty. Rail turns his helm slightly, the skull face seeming to stare directly into me. Step forward, Brother Sergeant Kaler. Kaler obeys, his steps resonant and deliberate as he kneels before the chaplain. The crozius touches his helm with a ringing chime. You will lead your brothers through the vigil. Guide their thoughts toward the Emperor. Guard them from the echoes that creep where vigilance falters. When the ritual completes, Kaler rises, and the weight of the task settles over all of us. The chaplain signals for us to follow him deeper into the reclusium, past towering pillars etched with ancient battle scenes. The floor beneath our boots shifts from cold stone to a smooth obsidian inlaid with thin veins of silver that glow faintly beneath our steps. We arrive at the Chamber of Oaths. This place is older than the fortress itself, built upon remnants of a bygone era, or so the librarians claim. Its domed ceiling reflects our forms back at us in ghostly distortions, making it feel as though a dozen phantoms march beside us. In the center of the chamber rests the reliquary standard, a long pole of dark metal wrapped in preserved fragments of Captain Mathon's battle flag. It is tattered, scorched, and marked with the impact points of weapons wielded by enemies, whose names history has already forgotten. As I gaze upon it, something stirs deep in my chest, a faint pressure, as if the past itself is leaning forward, searching for recognition. Kaler approaches and lifts the standard with both hands. The candles dim for a breath, shadows tightening like a held inhale. When the light returns, Kaler speaks, his voice low and resonant. We bear this not for glory, but for memory. We echo the words, 6 voices merging into one, heavy with ritual weight. As we turn to depart the chamber, something changes. Not in the air, not in the ground beneath our feet, but in the space behind thought. A flicker, a whisper, a sensation impossible to name. Perhaps it is nothing more than the gravity of the ritual. But as we begin the long walk toward the vigilarium, I cannot escape the feeling that something unseen has followed us from the Chamber of Oaths. Something patient, something old. The vigilarium lies at the eastern spine of the fortress-monastery, carved directly into the mountain's living stone. Few tread its halls except on days marked by mourning or remembrance, when duty demands not bloodshed but introspection. As we draw nearer, the air grows colder, touched by drafts that slip through ancient fractures in the rock. The scent of incense fades, replaced by the mineral chill of untouched stone and the faint whisper of wind threading through cracks like a distant lament. We march in silence, not the quiet of discipline, but something deeper, heavier, a stillness that settles inside the armor rather than around it. I feel the shift in my brothers as surely as I feel the weight of my own steps. Varen's breathing grows slower, measured. Kaler's grip tightens around the standard. Brother Selu's glances toward the narrow windows carved into the wall, slits barely wide enough to let through slivers of pale morning light. Each of us carries our own ghosts into the vigilarium, though none will speak of them aloud. The doors stand before us like monoliths, wrought iron veined with gold filigree shaped into the chapter's sigil. When Kaler presses his palm against the sigil, the doors respond with a resonant thrum. Mechanisms rumble within the mountain's bones, and the doors part with reverent slowness. A gust of cold air washes across us, carrying with it the scent of ancient dust and oil preserved from centuries past. The vigilarium is vast. Its ceiling arches into darkness far above, and the walls are lined with statues of warriors frozen in mid-battle, their expressions carved with solemn ferocity. At the center stands a single stone dais encircled by a ring of candles left to burn for decades at a time, their wax forming rivers that pool and harden on the floor like pale tributaries. Above the dais hangs a massive iron censer suspended by thick chains. It sways gently as though stirred by a breath none of us can hear. Kaler steps forward, planting the reliquary standard in the slot carved into the dais. The sound echoes far too loudly for the motion, as though the mountain itself has acknowledged the ritual. The flickering candlelight catches the scorched edges of the battle-torn banner, making its dark scars appear to shift like restless shapes. We kneel, Kaler intones. His voice is steady, but the chamber distorts it, stretching it into a low murmur that coils around us. The moment my knee touches the cold floor, I feel it again, that pressure, subtle yet unmistakable, brushing at the edges of my thoughts. Not intrusive, but present, curious. The sensation passes as quickly as it came, leaving behind only a faint ripple through my secondary heart. We bow our heads as Kaler begins the litany of fallen brothers. The words echo, ancient and measured, carrying the weight of centuries. Rael's earlier voice had been thunder, Kalos is the cold wind sliding over a battlefield after all fighting has ceased. In their footsteps we walk. In their shadows we stand. In their sacrifice we endure. We answer, though our voices merge with the chamber's acoustics until it becomes impossible to distinguish one from another. As the ritual continues, I let my mind drop into the controlled stillness drilled into us since our earliest trials. For in Astartes, meditation is not a gentle drift into thought. It is an enforced narrowing, a funnel through which only sanctioned memory may pass. Yet even within that rigid discipline, something shifts. Behind my sealed eyelids, a vision stirs, not a memory, not a dream, but an impression. Snow again, but this time it is falling in utter silence. No battle, no flames, just the cold weight of flakes settling on my gauntlets. A sky split not by artillery fire, but by a single streak of pale gold. A whisper crawls along the base of my skull. Not words. A sensation. An emotion that is not mine. Recognition. My eyes snap open. The chamber appears unchanged, the candles flickering lazily, the statues staring with their usual stony indifference. None of my brothers seem affected. Their postures remain rigid, their helms angled in reverence. I steady my breathing and attempt to dismiss the sensation. Rituals can stir echoes of things buried deep in the gene seed. The apothecaries warn of such phenomena, a harmless side effect of chemical memory, no more meaningful than the twitch of the fingers. That is what I tell myself. Yet as we rise from our kneeling positions, the censer overhead swings with a sudden, unnatural force, its chains groaning like the throat of some ageless beast. A cascade of sparks falls from the candles, scattering in erratic spirals, before extinguishing mid-air. The air thickens, pressing close against my armor with the weight of unseen attention. Kaler stiffens, his helm turning sharply toward the shadows, between two statues. Selous follows the motion, his hand drifting instinctively toward the hilt of his combat blade. But there is nothing there. Only darkness. Only cold. Only the distant heartbeat hum of the fortress. Kaler speaks first, his voice low. Brothers, hold your formation. We obey, forming a semicircle around the dais. My grip tightens around my bolt rifle, though I know instinctively this is not a threat that steel or holy bolts could answer. Then the hum of the fortress deepens, just for a moment, just enough to feel, not enough to measure. The candles gutter once more. The sensation at the edge of my thoughts returns, sharper now, as if something unseen is attempting to understand us, or remember us. And then, as swiftly as it came, it is gone. The chamber steadies. The air clears. The censer swings gently again, as though nothing had disturbed it. Kaler's voice cuts through the silence. The vigil is complete. But even as we turn to leave the vigilarium, I cannot shake the feeling that something awakened with us this morning. Something older than ritual. Something patient. Something that has not finished watching. Chapter 2. The Forge of Habit and Hunger. The fortress-monastery settles into a new rhythm after the vigil, though the shift is almost imperceptible, like a change in the air before a storm. To an outsider, the day appears no different from any other within these stone walls carved into the mountain spine. To a brother who has lived here for centuries, it is as obvious as a tremor beneath the surface of a frozen lake. Something lingers from the vigilarium, an echo carried in the spaces between footfalls and the charged stillness in the training halls. None speak of it openly, but I see the way Kaler's helm tilts slightly whenever he steps through shadowed passages, or how Varen's gaze lingers on the stained glass murals as though searching for the flicker of a truth half-remembered. Routine proceeds regardless. It must. Habit is our refuge, our armor as much as ceramite. The clang of the morning bell signals the commencement of combat rites, and we assemble in the Hall of Iron Forms, a massive chamber where the walls vibrate with ancient impact scars. The air is warm, tinged with the mineral tang of sweat, oil, and the faint ozone sting left by crackling force fields that separate training arenas. We march across the metallic floor, boots striking in unison, and the sound reverberates through the chamber like the steady heartbeat of a great machine. Tech serfs scurry along the periphery with their hunched postures and dogmatic limbs, calibrating servomotors and weapon racks with nervous precision. Their single-lensed eyes track our movements, reverence and fear blending behind the flicker of their internal displays. Brother Selous is assigned as my sparring partner today. He towers half a head taller than me, his armor bearing the deep grooves left by a Tyranid Biotalon during a siege 6 decades ago. Despite his imposing presence, Selous is quiet, reflective, his strength matched by a patience I have always found rare among our ranks. As we move into the arena, the energy barriers hum to life, sealing the two of us into a space drenched in pale blue light. The signal horn sounds. Selous lunges forward, his training blade a silver blur. I parry, but the impact sends a tremor through my arm. His strength has always been formidable. His second strike comes low, aiming for my knee joint, but I pivot and redirect, feeling the blade scrape across the reinforced plating. Our movements become a rhythm: strike, block, advance, retreat. The sound of ceramite clashing against reinforced alloy resounds like drum beats in the stone chamber. There's no anger here, no fury, only precision. The dance of warriors honing instincts sharpened beyond human limits. Each movement carries fragments of memory: the siege lines of Ordran, the dust storms of Cyrene's ruins, the metallic stench of a space hulk's decaying hull. In the arena, all those battles converge into pure, distilled reaction. Yet something is different today. I feel a slight hitch, a fraction of a second, between thought and motion. Not hesitation. Something else. As Selous strikes again, my blade intercepts his, but my wrist twitches as if resisting an unseen pull. The interruption lasts only a breath, but Selous notices. A faint tilt of his helm betrays his awareness. "Your focus wavers," he says, his voice low through the vox. Not accusatory. Observant. "Residual echoes from the vigil," I reply, though even as I speak, I know the words do not sit fully true. Selous circles me slowly, steps measured. "Do you feel it still?" I feel. I pause, searching for something concrete, something definable. A pressure, the sense of being regarded. He stops. For a moment, neither of us moves. The hum of the barrier vibrates through the soles of my boots, and distant clashes from other pairs echo through the hall. Finally, Selous speaks again. "You are not alone in that." Before I can answer, the signal horn sounds again, and we fall into defensive positions. The session continues, our conversation buried beneath the cadence of movement. The disturbance in my responses fades gradually, replaced by the familiar burn of exertion and the momentum of well-worn combat drills. I bury myself in the rhythm until the horn calls an end to the cycle, and the energy field dissipates with a soft crackle. Selous rests the edge of his blade against his shoulder, his posture contemplative. Perhaps the vigil stirred more than memory. Perhaps. Or perhaps something stirred beneath memory, something that had waited for the right moment to surface. We rejoin the others as the next phase of training begins. Weapons calibration, firing range drills, and tactical maneuvers. The pace intensifies, grinding away at hesitation until only instinct remains. It is during these hours that the mind becomes silent, stripped of distraction. Yet even in that inner quiet, the pressure persists, a faint pull, like gravity tilting in an unfamiliar direction. By the time the bell signals midday break, I feel as though something is hovering just beyond the threshold of comprehension. Watching, measuring, waiting. Whether it is a remnant of ritual or something awakened by it, I cannot tell. But its presence grows more distinct with each passing hour. The midday bell resonates through the fortress-monastery like a deep tremor rolling through the mountain. It marks a pause, but not a respite. Even at rest, we remain instruments awaiting the next command. The hall of iron forms empties as squads disperse toward their assigned stations, the metallic echoes of departing boots gradually fading into the wider hum that saturates every corridor of this ancient structure. We move toward the refectory in disciplined formation, though none of us truly hunger. The enhancements threaded through our bodies suppress most mortal needs. Yet an Astartes eats because ritual demands it. Sustenance is sacred, as all things connected to duty must be. The refectory itself is vast and austere, lined with banners chronicling campaigns that long predate my induction. Stone tables stretch across the chamber like the ribs of some colossal beast, each bearing the scars of centuries, scratches, heat scorch marks, fragments of engraving worn down by endless gauntlets. As we take our seats, the servitors glide forward on whispering treads, depositing nutrient paste in reinforced metal bowls. The substance resembles gray clay more than food, but its potency is undeniable. I lift a spoonful and allow the familiar warmth to slide down my throat, its bioengineered proteins immediately dispersing through my secondary heart and reinforcing my musculature. Kaler sits across from me, helm removed, features etched with lines that hint at age far deeper than a mortal face could carry. He does not speak at first, but his gaze carries the weight of someone who has been thinking in circles for hours. Varen and Selous sit to his flanks, their attention shifting between the silent ritual of eating and the occasional flicker of their helm displays as tactical updates scroll through their retinal implants. When Kaler finally speaks, his voice is low enough to avoid carrying down the long hall. You felt it during the vigil. It is not a question, though the others pause to listen. Selous inclines his head slightly. Varen's jaw tenses. My own answer escapes before I can temper it. Yes. Kaler's fingers drum once against the table, a soft metallic clang. It stayed with you during drills. Again, not a question. I know it. And you, brothers? He asks, turning to Varen and Selous. Varen swallows another mouthful before replying. A presence. Not intrusive. Observing. Selous adds. It was strongest when the sensor shifted. After it passed, the air felt thinner, as though something had departed. We say nothing for a moment. Conversations among other squads murmur faintly across the chamber, a low rumble beneath the stone arches. No one speaks loudly, even off the battlefield, and Astartes has little use for raised voices. Kaler leans forward. If this is a lingering echo from the vigils of old, we will endure it. If it is something else, his eyes narrow, the faint gleam of data overlays reflecting across their surface. We must not allow speculation to take root. The warning is clear. The Imperium allows little tolerance for the invention of meaning where none can be confirmed. Rumors become fear. Fear becomes weakness. Weakness becomes the seed of corruption. I lower my gaze to the bowl before me. The nutrient paste is cooling, forming thin cracks like dried riverbeds. As I push it aside, a faint vibration trembles through the table, subtle, like the shifting of distant machinery. Yet the look Kaler gives me says he felt it too. And Selous. And Varen. The vibration stops as quickly as it began. No alarm sound. No lights flicker. But every one of us has the same thought. It was not mechanical. It was not structural. It was too fine, too deliberate. After the meal, we stand and reattach our helms. The world tightens into the familiar confines of the visor, the static-filtered hum of my own breath returning to anchor my focus. The refectory doors slide open, revealing the long corridor leading toward the devotional training halls. As we walk, the banners along the walls flutter slightly, though no draft touches my armor. The candles burn straight. The air is unmoving, but the banners ripple once more, too gently to be coincidence, too synchronized to be natural. Varen's voice comes over the squad vox. Brother Sergeant, this is no lingering echo. Kaler does not respond immediately. When he does, his tone is measured, but tension coils beneath it. Maintain formation. Eyes forward. Thoughts guarded. We descend into the lower halls, where the clang of distant machinery blends with the rhythmic chanting of initiates practicing their first combat meditations. The scent of incense thickens, mingling with the faint burn of ionized air from the training pits. Yet with every step, the sensation grows stronger. That same subtle pressure, like a whisper brushing just beneath the edge of thought. Not hostile, not demanding, but aware. Aware of us. It watches not from above or behind, but from the narrow space between moments. A place no weapon can reach and no armor can shield. By the time we reach the threshold of the devotional hall, even Kaler's controlled posture betrays the tension in his shoulders. Whatever followed us from the vigilarium has not faded. It has grown clearer, closer, more curious. The devotional hall opens before us like the interior of a vast stone lung, ribbed with towering arches, dimly lit by hanging lanterns that flicker with amber flame. Rows of carved runic slabs line the walls, each inscribed with verses meant to anchor a warrior's mind against the encroaching pressures of solitude, memory, and the long shadow of duty. The air is warm here, touched by lingering incense and the faint crackle of electrostatic wards embedded in the floor. This is where an Astartes confronts himself. No enemy, no battlefield, only the disciplined silence needed to keep thought from wandering into danger. We take our positions across the hall, each assigned a circular platform marked with liturgical sigils that glow faintly beneath our boots. The moment I step onto mine, I feel the systems in my armor sync with the platform's low-frequency pulse. It settles into my bones, aligning breath with rhythm, heartbeats with measured cadence. The lights dim. A soft chime echoes through the hall. The meditative cycle begins. My visor darkens, then fades into a wash of muted shapes, just enough to discern position, not enough to distract. The soundscape narrows to the filtered whisper of breath and the distant thrum of the fortress-monastery's pulse. I let my mind sink into the ritual pattern drilled into us since youth. Acknowledgement of self, surrender of self, dissolution of memory into ordered fragments, reconstruction of discipline from the remnants. It is meant to be a closed circuit, safe, complete. But the moment my thoughts begin to settle into formation, I feel it. Not an intrusion, an arrival. Like the shift of weight on an unseen floor. Like the moment before a distant voice speaks, except it never does. A presence resting at the perimeter of awareness, circling the edges of my mind with slow, deliberate curiosity. I force the first litany into place. Fortify the walls. Focus the breath. Bind memory to discipline. The presence does not withdraw. It simply waits. Observes. For a heartbeat, my breath stutters. The platform beneath me flickers in response, sensing deviation. I correct immediately, adjusting posture, restoring the balance expected of an Astartes. Across the hall, I hear the faintest shift of armor, Selous, perhaps, or Varen. One of them faltering, one of them experiencing the same impossible pressure. But no one speaks. The cycle forbids it. Only Kaler's steady breathing offers any reassurance, and even that carries a subtle tension I have never heard from him before. I close my eyes fully. The litany continues. Order breath. Still the blood. Name the self. Release the self. The presence presses closer. Not forcefully, never forcefully. It is like a memory that does not belong to me trying to take shape. A distant warmth. A distant recognition. Then snow again. Falling in slow, soundless drifts. Not mine. Not from any world I have walked. A cathedral of ice rising from a plain of white. Arches made from frozen light. At its center, a single figure kneeling in silence. Armor half buried beneath crystalline frost. A single sensation radiates outward. Expectation. Not command. Not demand. Expectation. I snap out of the vision. So abruptly the platform under my feet shudders. My secondary heart kicks into a higher rhythm, preparing for threat response. My hands curl into fists. The visor clears instantly, returning the hall to view. The lanterns flare back to full flame. The session ends before its intended cycle. An unscheduled termination. That alone is wrong. Ritual cycles never end early. They are timed to the breath. To the second. Across the hall, Selous stands rigid, his chest plate rising with uncharacteristically rapid breaths. Varen's posture is stiff, helm angled sharply toward the eastern wall as though tracking something unseen. Kaler's stance is steady, but I can see the tension drawn tight along the line of his shoulders. A silence settles over us, not confusion, not panic. Recognition. We all felt it. Kaler steps off his platform. Form on me, he orders through the vox, voice taut with controlled urgency. We obey at once, assembling into a tight formation in the center of the hall. The lanterns sway gently overhead, though the air is still. When Kaler speaks again, the edge beneath his tone is unmistakable. This is no echo of memory. Something has changed within these walls. Varen shifts his weight. It tested the boundaries of thought, but it did not breach. Selous adds quieter. It was not hostile. Kaler's helm tilts slightly. Intent is not reassurance. Curiosity from the unknown is as dangerous as its wrath. I find my words only after a moment. It recognized us, or believed it did. The silence that follows carries more weight than any alarm klaxon. Before Kaler can respond, a distant tremor rolls through the lower foundation. Soft, subtle, deliberate. The hall's lantern flame elongates, pulled momentarily toward the source of the tremor before snapping back upright. Kaler's voice hardens. Weapons ready. We go now. We move, fast, disciplined, without hesitation. Yet as we cross the threshold of the devotional hall, I cannot escape one final sensation lingering at the edge of thought. Whatever watches us has grown closer, and it is no longer waiting in silence. The corridor beyond the devotional hall feels narrower than before, as though the mountain itself has shifted its weight. The stone walls rise steep around us, carved with reliefs of ancient campaigns, where heroes tower above their enemies in poses of righteous fury. I have walked this passage thousands of times. Today, each engraving seems to lean closer, their expression sharper, their shadows deeper. Kaler takes point, his steps silent despite the mass of his armor. Varen follows, flanking left, Selous to the right. I take the rear, covering the shadows behind us. Our formation is instinctual, second nature woven into muscle memory. But the tension threading through us is new, taut, unmistakable. The tremor that stirred the lanterns is not returned, yet I feel its afterimage in the hollow of the corridor, a faint pressure hovering midair like a vibration trapped in the stone. My armor's auspex displays flicker occasionally with static bursts, small enough to dismiss as interference, but rhythmic enough to make my primary heart beat faster. We descend the stairwell that spirals into the subtraining deck, the air cooling with each level. The scent shifts as well, trading incense and polished stone for the metallic tang of machine oil and the faint ozone sting that accompanies high-voltage conduits. Somewhere below, servo engines groan awake as mechanical racks reconfigure for scheduled drills. The mountain is alive with industry, with preparation, with purpose. Yet beneath that purposeful hum lies something else, something unaccounted for, something listening. As we reach the next landing, the lights flicker. The glow strips embedded in the walls dim, flare too bright, then stabilize. Not a blackout, not a malfunction. A pulse, precisely timed, synchronized with the heartbeat hum of the fortress we all know too well. Kaler halts. He raises a fist, signaling silence. The squad freezes. My visor magnifies the corridor ahead, resolving its faint haze into perfectly still air. Then I hear it, not through the vox, not through the helm's external pickups. Inside, a whisper, a pressure, a presence brushing the surface of thought with the careful curiosity of a gloved hand testing the grain of old parchment. It does not speak, but I feel its attention, direct, focused, intent. Kaler moves again, slower now. His voice threads into the squad vox, low and precise. No hostile signatures, no heat blooms, no motion. Selous answers, though his tone is graveled by tension. Yet something is here. The corridor opens into the lower training deck, a cavernous hall filled with suspended platforms, sparring cages, and retractable obstacles. It is empty now, the machinery dormant, its shadows long and unbroken. The silence here feels heavier than prayer, absorbing sound rather than acknowledging it. As we enter, Kaler gestures for a sweep pattern. We obey, fanning out. My boots thud softly against the metal-grated floor as I scan the upper gantries. Nothing moves. No servitors. No training drones. Only stillness. The pressure returns, stronger. A slow tightening around the edges of my mind. Not like a grip. More like the moment before one's breath condenses on cold glass. Then something impossible happens. The air in the center of the hall shifts. Not visibly. There is no distortion, no flicker of light. But my every instinct surges, secondary heart kicking into accelerated rhythm. Selous swings his aim toward the center. Varen steps behind a support pillar, bracing for impact. I do not aim. I cannot. Something holds my attention too completely. A sensation unfurls inside my skull. Recognition. the same as during the vigil, but now sharpened to clarity. Something knows us, not our names, not our thoughts. Something knows our shape, our presence, our nature. Then the hum of the fortress deepens again, a resonance so low it vibrates through the metal floor and up through my greaves. The lights flicker once more. A thin trail of dust drifts from the rafters, descending like falling ash. Kaler's voice snaps through the vox. Formation on me. We converge instantly. The pressure around us recedes, not vanishing, but coiling outward like a ripple of water disturbed by a stone. It withdraws to the far edges of the chamber, lingering just beyond the reach of perception. Kaler steadies his breathing. Whatever this presence is, it is bound to the vigilarium. Its reach extends, but only through memory invoked there. How do we counter what we cannot see? Varen asks. Kaler does not answer immediately. His helm turns toward me, the faint glow of his visor reflecting off my own. Brother, you felt its regard first. Describe its nature. I search for the right words, precise, untainted by fear or assumption. Words an Astartes would trust. Words a chaplain would not reject as superstition. It does not approach like an enemy, I say slowly. It watches with intention, recognition, as if searching for something familiar within us. Searching for what? Selous asks. I do not know. Kaler's posture shifts, subtle but unmistakable. A decision forming. Then we must return to where it found us first. The vigilarium? Varen asks. Kaler nods once. If there is an answer, it lies in the echo begun there. Silence falls, brief, but electric. Then the fortress trembles again, stronger than before. And this time, it feels like a heartbeat. Not mechanical, not structural, alive. Kaler gestures sharply. We move. As we ascend the stairwell once more, the unseen presence follows, closer than shadow, patient as an ancient memory clawing its way toward the surface. Chapter 3. The Red Hour descends. War rarely announces itself with alarms or sirens. More often, it begins with a shift in the air, the kind that makes every instinct sharpen and every reflex coil. When the summons finally came, it arrived not as a shock, but as confirmation of what we had already felt rising beneath the fortress's stone spine. We were halfway up the stairwell, returning from the depths where the presence had coiled around us like a silent observer, when the vox channels snapped open with a sudden burst of static. A voice followed, calm, controlled, unmistakably the tone of the watch sergeant on duty. All squads, prepare for immediate deployment. This is not a drill. Kaler froze mid-step. The entire squad halted behind him. The message repeated, cleaner this time, the static fading into a steady carrier tone. Threat convergence approaching orbit. Enemy classification, Xenos. Boarding probability high. All Astartes to battle stations. A thrumming wave of energy pulsed through the fortress as blast shutters slammed into place, sealing the stained glass windows beneath slabs of armored ceramite. Servo engines roared to life in distant corridors. The atmosphere thickened with the electrical tang of defensive systems powering up. Kaler spoke with the steady weight of command. Move. Now. We ascended the remaining stairs with the speed of falling thunder, boots striking stone in a pace that echoed through the mountain. The unseen presence that had stalked the edges of our thoughts retreated, the way a dream dissolves when dawn arrives. Whatever it was, whatever intention it held, it withdrew as though yielding space to a far more familiar force, war. The arming hall opened before us in a blaze of activity. Tech Marines snapped into motion, servitors rolled along conveyor tracks, and luminous runes ignited across the floor as armor integrity checks commenced. The air smelled of sacred oils, machine incense, and the sharp tang of energizing power packs. Brothers formed into squads, their movements efficient, ritualistic, each action honed through centuries of discipline. Kaler strode toward our designated armor bay as the Tech Marine overseer turned, mechadendrites whirring. Squad Primus. It rasped, voice modulated through metallic vox. Your war plate is sanctified and ready. One by one, our armor sealed around us with hissing locks and the thud of interlocking ceramite plates. My helm clamped down with a resonant click, and the interior displays flared to life. Heart rate steady. Ammunition full. Systems green. Across the squad comms, I heard Selous whisper the first line of the Catechism of Fury, a habit of his before battle. Through wrath, clarity. Through clarity, victory. Varen joined him. Then I did. Then Kaler. Our unified voices filled the helmets with the low, solemn chant of warriors preparing to carve their mark into the galaxy once more. The fortress trembled, not from the unseen presence this time, but from the shock of void shields flaring as orbital fire kissed their surface. A deep, resonant boom traveled through the stone, rolling across the arming hall like distant thunder. Kaler activated the squad channel. Identify the threat. The watch sergeant responded immediately. Xenos raiders. Pattern suggests orc marauders, but signal signatures show deviation. Possibly splinter warbands. No capital-class vessels detected, but their boarding craft are numerous. Selous muttered, "Orcs never come in silence. If their signature deviates, something else leads them." Kaler answered, "Speculation later. Duty now." We moved toward the drop pod bay as the red lights strobed overhead, illuminating the chamber in pulses of crimson, painting us in the hue of blood long before any was shed. The drop pod stood ready, their interiors glowing with a faint amber light, restraints open like the jaws of steel beasts ready to swallow us whole. As we crossed the threshold, the pressure of the earlier presence returned, not strong, not intrusive, but there, watching, waiting. A strange sensation prickled along the edges of my thoughts. Not warning, not fear, recognition, as if this moment, this descent into war, was exactly what it had been waiting to witness. I stepped into the drop pod. The restraints locked across my chest. The deck vibrated beneath my boots as power surged through the pod's ignition coils. Kaler took the central position, his stance rigid, his gaze fixed forward. The red lights dimmed. The klaxon sounded. The launch sequence began, and in the instant before the pod fired, the presence whispered, not in words, but in the pressure of a single emotion pressed into my mind. Expectation. The floor dropped away. The descent began. The red hour had come. The drop pod shook as it tore through the upper atmosphere, the descent turning the world into a howling blur of motion and pressure. Red warning sigils flickered across my visor, not from malfunction, but from the sheer violence of our entry vector. The storm outside screamed against the pod's armored shell, yet inside, all was still except for the steady vibration running through the restraints anchored to my chest. Kaler's voice cut through the comms, a measured growl grounded in centuries of command. Impact in 30 seconds. Weapons hot the instant the ramp opens. No hesitation. The squad acknowledged as one. But even through the calm cadence of our responses, I felt the same tension threading through each of us, a taut awareness, heightened not by fear, but by the uncanny pressure that had stalked our minds since the Vigilarium. Even now, in the crushing descent toward a battlefield we had yet to see, the phantom presence lingered, watching with that same cold, impossible patience. For a heartbeat, the drop pod's interior dimmed, not visually, but perceptually, as though some unseen force brushed a shadow across the inside of my skull. The same presence, the same curious weight. It did not hinder. It simply witnessed. Then the impact hit. A brutal, bone-shuddering slam that sent cracks spidering across the scorched earth beneath us. The restraints released. The ramp detonated downward, and the world outside was wrong. I expected fire, smoke, the thunder of crude weapons, the bellowing roar of green-skinned marauders. Instead, the landing zone sprawled before us in an eerie, predatory silence. The air shimmered with displaced shadows. The stone structures that made up the outlying settlement were gouged open by cuts too clean for explosives, too precise for crude Xenos brutality. Kaler stepped forward first, bolter-shouldered. "Drakari," he said, his voice tightening with the weight of memory. "Raiders." The word carried gravity. Drakari strikes were not invasions, they were harvests. Swift, surgical, merciless. Selous scanned the horizon. Their skimmers leave no thermal trail. They are here. The ground itself felt tense beneath my boots, as if bracing for a blow. The shadows along the broken walls flickered unnaturally, Too sharp, too thin, like ink twitched by an unseen hand. My armor sensors detected movement, but each reading dissolved into static the moment I turned toward it. It's the same interference, Varen muttered. The presence. It's interacting with our systems. Kaler snapped. Ignore it. Eyes open. Advance. We moved in staggered formation, weapons raised. The world around us felt hollowed out, drained of life except for the faint metallic scent of blood lingering in the cold air. The settlement's central square lay ahead, a wide courtyard split by a cracked fountain where water still spilled sluggishly into a basin stained dark. Then the shadows coiled. A shape peeled itself from the air, a Drukhari warrior in barbed armor, helm elongated into a cruel visage. It did not emerge as much as unfold, stepping out of a tear in reality with the grace of a venomous serpent. Its blade gleamed with a wet sheen. Its movements were too smooth, too silent, as if gravity itself bent politely out of its way. Kaler fired first. A bolter round screamed across the courtyard, detonating against the Xeno's chest plate in a burst of fire and ceramite shards. The warrior crumpled, limbs twitching, acidic blood hissing as it ate into the stone. But the kill was not satisfying. It was a warning. Dozens of shadows shifted along the rooftops. Then hundreds. Drukhari raiders, sliding through fractures in the air like living blades given form. Contact right. Selous thundered. 2 on the left. Varen roared. Kaler's command split the chaos. Form the Iron Crescent. Hold the line. We locked into formation just as the raiders struck. They descended with impossible speed, their blades shimmering with toxin oils, their movements distorted as though slipping between instants of time. My first shot blew apart the torso of a warrior mid-leap. The second round cracked another's helm, spilling its shrieking form across broken stone. But even as we fought, even as our bolters roared and our blades met their twisted steel, that unseen presence pressed against my thoughts. Not invasive, not hindering, observing, evaluating. And as a Drukhari warrior lunged toward me with a blade aimed for my throat seal, I felt it again, sharp, focused, like a hand guiding the edge of reflex. I moved faster than instinct, faster than training. My blade intercepted the strike with a precision I had never known. The Xenos fell in 2 smoking halves. Kaler saw it. I felt his stare even through the blur of battle. Something had awakened inside the vigilarium. And now, in the slaughter of the Red Hour, it was beginning to reveal itself. The battlefield writhed with motion, shadows slashing across stone, Drukhari warriors slipping between fractures in reality like living blades cast by a malignant will. Each strike they made came with a cruel elegance, their bodies bending at angles that defied human anatomy, their weapons arcing in shimmering trails of toxin and malice. Our bolters thundered in disciplined bursts, detonations lighting the courtyard in brutal strobe-like flashes. Kaler fought at the center of our formation, every movement a study in controlled fury. His rounds tore through Drukhari torsos, limbs, and helm plumes in explosive bursts of fire and shards. Selous stood beside him, a pillar of relentless strength, carving through raiders with sweeping blows that left arcs of steaming blood across the cracked stones. Varen's aim was precise, surgical, each shot a clean execution that sent a Xenos warrior collapsing into writhing ruin. And still they came, not like a tide, but like a knife repeatedly dipped into the same wound. I advanced a step, firing controlled shots that tore through a cluster of raiders darting toward our flank. The air shimmered in their wake, the distortion they traveled through rippling like a heat mirage. Their death cries were sharp, metallic, like metal-scraping bone. Yet, beneath the roar of bolter fire and the screech of dying Xenos, I felt something else. A pulse, a pressure, a presence that drew closer with each kill. Not hostile, not benevolent, simply watching with an intensity that bordered on suffocating. Another raider lunged from above, descending with twin-hooked blades angled to pierce the ventilation ridges of my helm. My body reacted before thought could form. I pivoted, brought my combat blade up in a reverse grip, and carved a diagonal slash so precise it split the warrior's arm from shoulder to wrist. The creature shrieked, body twisting unnaturally as it fell. But it wasn't my precision that startled me. It was the echo that followed. A momentary flash. Snow. Falling silently over a cracked battle standard half buried in white. A metallic hand reaching through frost. Not mine. Not any brother's I recognized. Something older, more resolute. The vision vanished as another Drakari vaulted toward me, but the afterimage clung to the back of my mind like a lingering burn. Kaler's voice tore through the calms. Regroup. They are trying to encircle. We tightened formation instantly. A volley of splinter fire hissed across the courtyard, shards of toxic crystal shattering against our shoulder plates. One shard grazed Seleuc's pauldron, leaving a smoking gouge etched with iridescent residue. He growled and fired point-blank into the skull of the warrior who fired it, the blast reducing its head to a mist of chemical vapor and bone fragments. The ground trembled suddenly, not from weapons or explosions, but from something deeper, the same throbbing resonance we had felt in the vigilarium. My heart stuttered. The pressure returned, sharper, heavier. I staggered half a step, not from injury, from recognition. The presence was no longer watching from a distance. It was here, close, hovering just behind thought. Kaler noticed. Brother, report. I began, but the words dissolved as a Drukari gladiatrix emerged from a tear in the air behind him. Her armor glinted with cruel barbs, her helm crowned in serrated fins. She moved too fast, her blades already mid-arc toward Kaler's exposed flank. There was no time for warning, no time for thought. Something inside me surged. Not instinct, not training. Something deeper, older. My body moved before any command crossed my mind. I lunged, slamming into Kaler, driving him aside as the blade meant for him carved a streak of violet sparks across my chest plate. Pain flared, muted by the armor's internal dampeners. I drove my combat knife upward, jamming it beneath the raider's ribcage, twisting until her armor buckled and her body convulsed in a spasm of toxic blood. She collapsed at my feet. Kaler rose, staring at me with a shock that he masked a heartbeat later. You moved before the threat manifested. I saw it. My voice felt distant, unsteady, as though speaking on borrowed breath. The pressure inside my skull thickened. Not invasive, not corrosive, almost guiding. Seleucus fired a burst past my shoulder, killing a raider leaping for the fountain. We cannot hold this position, he growled. They are phasing in too fast. Varen added, and whatever is touching our minds is growing stronger. Kaler turned his helm toward me. Brother, what do you perceive? The presence pulsed. Not a voice, not a mind, but an intention, a pull. It wants us to move, I said. Not away. Forward. Kaler hesitated, barely a flicker. Then he nodded. Then forward we go. We advanced, bolters roaring once more as the Drakari shrieked and dissolved into their ribboning shadow folds. And above the battle, unseen, the presence followed, no longer passive, no longer distant, drawing nearer with a purpose I could feel in the marrow of my enhanced bones. We pushed deeper into the ruined settlement, cutting through the Drakari with the brutal efficiency born of centuries of war. Yet with every meter gained, the battlefield itself seemed to shift, stone archways bending subtly in perspective, shadows stretching against the direction of the light, the air humming with a low resonance that felt less like sound and more like breath drawn by something immense and unseen. The Drakari struck from above, from below, from folds in reality that peeled open like wounds in the air. They descended on razor-edged grav discs and leapt from shattered rooftops, their armor hissing with toxins that shimmered in iridescent streams as they moved. I saw one warrior bound across the courtyard on legs that bent backward in predatory arcs, its twin daggers dripping with a venom that smoked on contact with the wind. Varen intercepted it with a clean bolt round through the sternum, sending it spiraling backward in a cloud of spiked armor fragments. But even as they attacked with their usual savage grace, something in the raiders' movements felt wrong. They hesitated. Their strikes lacked cohesion. Their formation fractured in ripples. Seleucus noticed it too. They're faltering, he growled between shots. Kaler's voice was steady. Drakari do not falter. Something disrupts them. Something, or something else. A shadow burst into existence directly ahead, stretching into the angular form of a Drakari reaver, whose blade arced toward my throat in a crescent of gleaming toxin. Before the strike could land, my body moved with impossible precision, blade meeting blade at a perfect angle, twisting, stripping the weapon from its grip, and driving my elbow through its sternum with a force that cracked armor and bone alike. The warrior collapsed in a twitching heap at my feet. Kaler saw again. Selous saw. Even Varen saw. Movements no Astartes should make. Reactions faster than any muscle memory. Reflexes guided by something that sat just behind thought, directing the shape of motion without ever revealing itself fully. For a heartbeat, the world around me blurred. Not with speed. With memory not my own. Cold air. Snow again. The hushed silence of a frozen plain. A figure kneeling in the distance, half buried in ice. Helm bowed beneath a tattered banner. A sensation like a hand resting against the back of my mind. Firm, steady, purposeful. Then the vision shattered like thin glass. Kaler's shout snapped back into focus. Contact rear. We wheeled in unison as a squad of Drakari Cabalites emerged from the shadow folds, their splinter rifles raised in elegant unison. The volley of crystalline shards hissed toward us. I dove behind a collapsed column, firing bursts that turned their sleek forms into ruptured pieces of wet armor and chemical vapor. Selous engaged another group with brutal sweeps of his combat blade, splitting two warriors apart in a single arc. The skirmish ended in seconds. Too easily. Too quickly. Drakari never retreat without purpose. Yet now the survivors fled into their shadow tiers, as though chased by something far deadlier than us. Kaler stepped into the center of the courtyard, surveying the carnage. "This is not a raid," he murmured. "They are being driven." Varen adjusted his grip on his bolter. "By us." "No," Kaler answered quietly. His helm turned toward me. "By whatever walks behind our brother's thoughts." The air tightened. A pressure drew inward, coiling around the space we occupied. The world dimmed at the edges, not physically, but perceptually, colors losing vibrancy, sound narrowing into a deep undercurrent. Even the smoke drifting from shattered buildings moved unnaturally, drawn toward a point behind us. I felt it before I turned. Felt it like a breath on the back of my neck. A silent recognition. A summons. The presence stepped closer. Not in body. Not in shadow. In the space inside the mind where instinct ends and something older begins. Selous lifted his helm slightly, as though hearing a voice the rest could not. His tone dropped to a low whisper. "It wants something." Kaler barked, "Whole formation." We snapped into position, but the presence did not strike or invade or press. It merely settled, like a mantle dropped softly over the squad. Then, for the first time, something changed in its nature. A sensation pulsed outward from it. A warning. A direction. A push. My visor flickered. A tactical overlay appeared, glitched, half-formed, but unmistakable. A vector pointing deeper into the settlement's heart, toward the manufactorum ruins at the edge of the ridge, toward something hidden beneath the stone. Kaler spoke slowly, voice taut. "Brother, did you project that?" "No," I said. "It showed me." The squad stared at me in silence, not with fear, with a disciplined readiness, sharpened by the knowledge that whatever awaited us next was not just another enemy. Kaler raised his blade in a single deliberate gesture. "Then that is where we go." As we advanced toward the heart of the ruins, the presence followed, its attention no longer drifting, but fixed on us with unmistakable purpose. And far beneath the stone, something answered it. Chapter 4. Echoes in the void between stars. The manufactorum ruins rose before us like the bones of some titanic beast, stripped bare by centuries of harsh winds. Shattered chimneys jutted into the sky, their broken mouths exhaling thin streams of vapor that twisted upward in the cold air. Bent metal ribs, caked with rust and scorched residue, arched over collapsed assembly lines and skeletal conveyor frames. What machinery remained flickered with dying energy pulses, their dim lights casting long, segmented shadows that slithered across the rubble. The presence pressed closer as we approached, no longer a distant whisper, no longer a curious sensation drifting at the edges of thought. It now lingered directly behind the eyes, a silent, steady weight that shaped the air around us, pulling the world into a narrower focus. Every sound sharpened, every breath deepened. The faint hiss of wind through fractured ductwork felt like a message in a language just beyond comprehension. Kaler moved with deliberate purpose, though even he could not mask the tension drawn tight through his stance. Varen's grip on his bolter remained ironclad, his helmet tilting minutely at every flicker of light. Selu scanned the rooftops and broken gantries overhead, aware that Drakari raiders could slip between realities seams at any moment. But the Xenos did not appear. The battlefield had fallen silent, too silent, as if something else now held dominion over this place. We entered through a partially collapsed archway, stepping over scorched servitor husks and shattered cogitator banks. The interior of the manufactorum was vast, cavernous, and unervingly intact. Dust motes drifted through the air, illuminated by shafts of pale light slanting through cracked ceiling panels high above. Rows of automated assembly arms, frozen mid-motion, hung suspended like the limbs of metallic corpses waiting to be reanimated. Then the hum began, soft at first, almost beneath hearing. A resonance that rippled through the metal flooring, vibrated along the fractured conduits, shivered down the reinforced pillars like a living pulse traveling through veins. Selous halted. That is no machine spirit. Varen's visor glowed with tactical overlays. No known manufactorum pattern produces a frequency like this. Kaler answered with a quiet gravity. It comes from below. Below. The moment he said it, I felt the pull intensify, a tug like the current of a deep river, slow but irresistible, drawing thought and instinct alike toward the manufactorum's foundations. I stepped forward without meaning to, boots ringing softly against the steel platform. The presence nudged my mind, not forceful, but aware, almost urging. It wanted us to descend. It wanted to show us something buried beneath the rubble and metal carcasses of the structure. Kaler noticed my movement and turned sharply. Brother, report. It's coming from beneath the assembly floor, I said. Something calls to us. The squad exchanged glances, silent, disciplined, but taut with the weight of unspoken questions. Not fear. Astartes do not fear. But even we recognize when the galaxy shifts in ways that do not fit the expected pattern of battle. Kaler approached a ruined control lectern, his gauntlet fingers sweeping aside rubble to expose a still active interface. Pale glyphs flickered across the cracked surface, their logic stuttering, looping, repeating like a wounded mind trying to form sentences. He forced the controls open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a recessed lift mechanism beneath. The platform trembled, gears grinding reluctantly as ancient locks disengaged. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. A column of stale, cold air rose from the dark shaft below. Selous murmured, "This place should not have a sublevel. Not in this pattern of settlement." Varen replied, "Unless it predates the manufactorum itself." Kaler locked eyes with me. I felt the question he didn't speak, an unspoken demand for certainty. "There is something waiting below," I said, "and it knows we're coming." The presence pulsed. Not approval, not command, but acknowledgement, as if it had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Kaler nodded. "Squad Primus, prepare for descent." We stepped onto the lift platform. The machinery groaned under our weight, ancient gears grinding as the controls sputtered to life in a flicker of sparks. The platform shuddered once, then began its slow descent into darkness. The walls slid past us, layers of metal giving way to raw stone, stone giving way to strata of unfamiliar alloy, and inscriptions that did not match human construction. Some symbols glowed faintly as we passed, reacting to our presence. Others remained dark, as though slumbering. The further we descended, the colder the air became. Frost crept along the walls in delicate veins, shimmering softly. My breath fogged inside my helm. Then the hum intensified, a deep, resonant tone that thrummed through my bones, and the presence stepped fully into my awareness. Not intruding, not overwhelming, but standing beside thought as though it had always belonged there. Kaler tightened his grip on his bolter. Brothers, weapons ready. The lift slowed. The darkness below brightened with a faint, otherworldly glow. A cavern spread open beneath us, and at its center stood a figure, kneeling, motionless, half entombed in frost and stone. The same figure I had seen in the visions. The same silhouette waiting beneath the snow of memory, not my own. The presence pulsed once, sharp and clear, as if saying, "You are finally here." The lift came to a grinding halt as the cavern opened wide beneath us, its enormity swallowing the faint glow that bled from the cracks in the ancient ceiling. The air was dense with cold, not the natural chill of a mountain's core, but something older, sharp, metallic, almost ceremonial. Frost crept across the platform beneath our boots, cracking softly under our weight as we stepped onto the cavern floor. Light seeped from veins of pale luminescence running through the walls, washing the chamber in an eerie glow that danced between blue and silver. The space was vast, carved with precision no imperial pattern recognized. Every angle unnervingly perfect, every surface so smooth it reflected distorted silhouettes. Ancient symbols spiraled across the stone, their forms shifting subtly when viewed from the corner of the eye. They were not human, not mechanicus, something else. But none of that commanded our full attention. All of it bent, subtly but undeniably, toward the figure at the center of the cavern. It remained kneeling where frost clutched at its joints and shoulders, as though the mountain itself sought to bury it through the slow patience of centuries. The armor, if armor it was, gleamed beneath a thin lattice of ice, dark metal etched with runic veins that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat buried beneath winter. One gauntlet hand rested on the hilt of a weapon driven into the ground, its blade half swallowed by stone. No breath moved its chest. No pulse stirred the frost at its helm grill. Yet the presence within my mind surged, as if the frozen warrior were the center of its gravity, as if it had been waiting for us to find this exact shape in the darkness. Kaler halted, his posture rigid. "Identify." The cavern swallowed his command, echoing it back in fading fragments. No armor pattern matched what we saw, no chapter markings, no imperial aquila, no sigils known to any registry. The runes carved along the figure's pauldrons pulsed again in slow, deliberate rhythm. Selous approached to step forward before Kaler raised a hand. "Negative. Hold position." "It isn't moving," Selous replied. "Neither does a void mine until you step on it." Varen muttered. I said nothing. My entire mind was fixed on the presence. Its pressure no longer diffuse, no longer uncertain. It was aligned, centered, as if the kneeling figure anchored it. But its attention wasn't directed solely at the figure. It was directed at us. At me most of all. A pulse rippled through the chamber. Light flared along the runes. A crack split the frost along the figure's shoulder, with a sound like ice breaking beneath a boot. Selous' voice dropped to a growl. "Movement." Kaler raised his bolter instantly. Weapons primed. Steady. The presence in my mind tightened. Not with hostility, not with fear, but with a rising urgency, an insistence. A memory of snow flashed behind my eyes. Not mine. His. Then the kneeling figure shifted, not with the jerking motion of reanimation, nor the shriek of metal waking after millennia. Instead, it rose with impossible silence, frost cascading from its armor in glittering sheets, shedding winter like a discarded mantle. The cavern floor trembled under the weight of its first full movement, a low groan running up through my boots. The warrior's helm lifted slightly, the visor a slit of dark glass that reflected our torch beam lights in a muted shimmer. The weapon embedded in the stone twitched as the figure wrapped its hand around the hilt. Kaler tensed. "Unknown entity, hold your ground and state your allegiance." The warrior did not answer, at least not with voice. The presence flared, filling my skull, like a rising tide pressing against the walls of thought, not crushing but overwhelming in its clarity. A single image formed behind my eyes. Us, Squad Primus, standing as we were now. The cavern, the frost, the kneeling warrior. Seen from his perspective, he had been waiting, not for the Imperium, not for salvation, for us. The figure took one step forward. Stone cracked under its weight. The runes along its armor pulsed brighter, beating in time with the presence. Kaler barked a warning. "One more step and we fire." The warrior halted instantly, not out of fear, not out of threat response. It stopped because the presence brushed against my thoughts with a firm, clear insistence. If you fire, you will destroy the truth you came for. The words were not words, not sound, just a sensation shaped into meaning. I exhaled slowly. My Lord Sergeant. Kaler turned slightly, not taking his aim off the unknown. Speak. It is not hostile, I said. The certainty in my voice startled even me. It knew we were coming. It called us here. Selu's helm turned sharply. You are certain? Yes. I wasn't sure if it was my voice or something guiding it, but the truth of it resonated through me with unshakable clarity. The warrior shifted again, lifting its free hand, not toward its weapon, not toward aggression, but toward us. Toward me. Kaler's voice lowered. Then why summon Astartes? The presence pulsed in response, and an answer formed in the cold space of my mind like frost crystallizing on glass. Because only warriors shaped by duty can bear what must be carried next. A faint crack split the stone beneath the figure's feet. The frost around its helm melted, and for the first time, beneath all the cold and echo, I sensed emotion within the presence. Recognition, not of who we were, but of what we were meant to become. The cavern fell into a silence so absolute it felt carved out of the air itself. The kneeling warrior, no longer kneeling, no longer motionless, steadied its stance as the last traces of frost slid down its armor in thin crystalline sheets. The weapon in its hand hummed faintly, resonating with a tone that vibrated through the stone at our feet. This was no simple blade. Each etched rune along its surface glowed like a heartbeat trapped in metal, rising and fading in a rhythm that matched the pulse now threading through my thoughts. Kaler held his aim steady, every instinct sharpened to the finest edge of readiness. His voice remained level, but there was gravity beneath it, a tension wound tight. Unknown entity, identify yourself. The figure did not move. It did not raise its weapon. It did not speak. Instead, the cavern itself responded. A ripple of light pulsed along the walls, illuminating the spiraling symbols that had once seemed dormant. They brightened in synchronized waves, like the breath of a slumbering titan stirring beneath layers of ice and stone. The presence in my mind surged with the light, no longer subtle, no longer drifting. It was awake. Varen muttered, "By the throne." Selous tightened his grip on his blade. "Sergeant, the runes, they react to it." Kaler did not look away from the entity. "I see them." His voice dropped. "And I see our brother reacting as well." They all saw it. The way the pulse in the cavern resonated with the same rhythm that trembled through my chest. The way the figure's visor seemed fixed on me, and me alone, as if the space between us were a single drawn breath. Then the presence pressed into my thoughts again. Gentle, deliberate, insistent. Not a command. Not even a suggestion. A memory. Snow falling in utter silence. The kneeling figure half buried beneath white drifts. My own gauntlet hand reaching out, meeting his. Two warriors sharing a single purpose, suspended through time like frost caught in still air. But the memory wasn't mine. It was giving it to me, showing me the shape of a past I had never lived. A past tied to this warrior's long vigil beneath the mountain. My breath caught. "Sergeant," I said quietly, "it isn't our enemy." Kaler didn't lower his bolter. "Then what is it?" The presence pulsed again. A wave of clarity, heavy, ancient, solemn, settled through my thoughts like a mantle placed upon my shoulders. "It is." I searched for words that made sense in a world shaped by war and doctrine. "A guardian." Selous hissed through his vox. "Of what?" The cavern answered before I could. Light flared again, stronger this time, rushing from the runes toward the center of the cavern in rivers of pale radiance. The floor trembled, the patterns shifting under our boots as the very stone reconfigured, revealing a circular depression etched with more symbols that ignited one by one. The warrior stepped back, allowing the light to settle. The echoes in my mind grew sharper. Kaler breathed. "An ancient vault." Varen corrected him. "No Imperial design. No Mechanicus fabrication." Selous added, "Then whose?" The presence answered, not with language, not with sound, but with a single collision of sensation and certainty. The ones who stood before you. The words tore through my mind like a gust of frigid wind. Not spoken. Not heard. Understood. The figure turned its helm slightly, the motion precise and almost reverent. The weapon it carried pulsed again, sending a tremor through the chamber like a low, resonant chime. The runes responded instantly, shifting into patterns that coiled around the depression at the cavern's center. Kaler's grip tightened. "Brother, what is it doing?" "It's showing us the vault," I said. "It wants us to see what it protected." Selous stepped forward a pace, unable to restrain his disbelief. "Protected for whom?" "For us," I said. The truth came from the presence itself, sharp and undeniable. This vault was never meant for others, only for warriors who carry duty in their blood. Kaler shifted his stance. "You speak as though you know its purpose." "I don't," I answered. "But it does." The warrior turned toward me fully. Its runes flared. The cavern brightened. The presence filled my vision. And then something happened that no part of my training had ever prepared me for. The warrior raised its free hand toward me, palm open, as if offering something unseen. Kaler snarled, "Hold position." But I did not move to attack, nor did I step back. I felt the truth pulsing from the presence. Not threat, not corruption, but a solemn, ancient will that carried neither malice nor deceit. A purpose sealed beneath the mountain long before our chapter ever walked these halls. The warrior's palm remained open, inches from mine. The air between us thrummed like a drawn bowstring. Varen whispered, "Emperor, guide us." Kaler's voice dropped to a growl. "Brother, do not engage until I give the—" But I already understood. The presence was not asking for blind obedience. It was asking for acknowledgement, recognition, acceptance of a mantle that had waited in the dark through ages of frost and ruin. It wanted me to touch its hand. The cavern dimmed around the edges. The pulse of the runes reached a crescendo. The warrior remained still as stone, waiting. I lifted my hand slowly, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a brother accepting a vow written before memory itself. And as my gauntlet touched the warrior's palm, the cavern exploded with light. Light tore through the cavern like a silent detonation, brilliant, cold, and absolute. It swallowed vision. It swallowed sound. For a heartbeat, I felt weightless, suspended in a void where neither armor nor bone seemed to matter. The presence surged through me in a rush of cold fire, not burning but illuminating every corner of thought with a clarity so intense it bordered on pain. My secondary heart hammered once, twice, then fell into perfect synchrony, with the pulse radiating from the warrior's open palm. When the light receded, I found myself standing not in the cavern, but within a vast, shifting expanse of pale glow and shadow. It had no horizon, no ceiling, only faint silhouettes of shapes drifting in a cold mist that clung to the edges of perception. It was not a place. It was a memory so old it creaked with the weight of ages. And the kneeling warrior stood before me, no longer frozen in frost, no longer bound by stone. Its armor glowed faintly, runes alive with inner resonance. Beneath the visor's dark slit, I sensed, not saw, eyes watching with a patience carved from centuries. The presence pressed gently against my mind again, and shapes began to coalesce from the mist. Figures in similar armor marching through snow-choked valleys, vast citadels carved into frozen cliffs, a sigil half-etched into a banner snapping in a storm of white. These were not Astartes, not from Terra, not from the Imperium at all. Ancient warriors forgotten by time, standing vigil in a world swallowed by ice and silence. Their armor was different, leaner, heavier in some places, runes glowing like veins of trapped starlight. Their discipline radiated through the memory, like iron forged in prayer. They marched not in conquest, but in duty, eternal, unbroken. And at the center of those memories stood the warrior whose hand still touched mine, standing alone on a ridge of ice, helm bowed, weapon buried in the snow before him like a gravestone. The memories wrapped around him in strands of cold wind. The presence shifted, not speaking, not commanding, but revealing. A world, a war, a vow. Fragments of a final stand flickered through the haze. Shadows of monstrous shapes advancing across a frozen wasteland. towers collapsing beneath tides of darkness, warriors falling one by one, until only he remained, wounded but unbroken. He had knelt not to surrender. He had knelt to endure, to wait, and he had waited for us. The vision fractured. The cavern returned. My helm display flickered violently before stabilizing. Frost drifted from my gauntlet as I withdrew my hand from the warrior's palm, a faint trail of pale light lingering between us like a stretched thread of memory. Kaler surged forward instantly, placing himself between the warrior and the squad. "Brother, report." I staggered, breath unsteady, vision still echoing with shards of cold light. "Sergeant," it showed me a memory. No, an oath. A vigil older than our chapter, older than this world. Selu's voice was deep, cautious. "Did it speak?" "No," I shook my head. "It doesn't speak in sound. It shares meaning." The presence pulsed softly, affirmation. Kaler turned toward the warrior. "Why summon a space marine? What purpose does this vigil serve?" There was no reply, but the cavern itself answered. The runes circling the central depression ignited, swirling into a vortex of cold radiance. The stone beneath us shifted, revealing a sealed chamber glowing with the same pale energy. A low hum rose from the vault, ancient, resonant, alive. Varen stepped back. "Emperor's light." Kaler's tone hardened. "Brother, what does it want us to take?" My gaze drifted toward the vault. The presence pressed gently, not urging, inviting. "It wants us to carry forward what it protected." I said quietly, "Not a weapon, not knowledge." My voice steadied, becoming certain. "A burden, a legacy." Selous growled softly. "And if we refuse?" The presence flickered. Sadness, resolve, inevitability. I swallowed. "Then it waits another 1,000 years." Kaler stood silent for a long moment. Then he lowered his bolter. "Just slightly. We will see this through. Squad Primus, advance." The warrior stepped aside to grant us passage. The vault doors shuddered open. Pale light spilled into the cavern like the breath of a forgotten star. As we crossed the threshold, the presence followed, closer than shadow, colder than winter, carrying with it the weight of an oath carved in ice and memory. Whatever lay within the vault was the reason for that ancient vigil, and now it was ours to face. Chapter 5. The Long Vigil of the Emperor's Sons. The vault swallowed us in a wash of cold radiance as we stepped through its widening threshold. The air within was impossibly still, so still that the faint echoes of our armored footfalls sounded intrusive, almost disrespectful, as though we had crossed into a sanctum untouched by the passage of time. The walls curved in a perfect arc, their surfaces forged from an alloy that reflected no light, yet shimmered faintly with an inner glow. Symbols, those same shifting runes etched into the kneeling warrior's armor, spiraled across the chamber, reconfiguring in slow, deliberate patterns the moment our boots touched the floor. Kaler raised his hand. "Hold," he murmured, though his voice carried through the vault as a soft tremor rather than a command. Selous halted beside him, visor angled upward toward the moving runes. Varen kept his bolter trained forward, the muzzle steady but the tension in his posture unmistakable. The presence pressed closer. No longer a whisper, no longer a drifting weight. It stood with us fully, an invisible figure at our side, its attention anchored on the heart of the vault where a raised dais of dark stone rose from the floor. Upon it rested an object unlike anything I had seen in all my centuries of service. A casket, elongated, black as a starless void, its surface etched with faint latticework that pulsed in quiet rhythms. The runes surrounding it brightened, forming a halo around the structure, as though the vault itself offered warning or reverence. Kaler approached first, stepped slow, deliberate. "By the Emperor," he breathed. The casket was not sealed by locks or wards. It lay dormant, resting as if in slumber. Frost gathered at its base, spreading outward in thin crystalline webs. A faint hum radiated from it, a vibration that resonated in the chest, not the ears. A heartbeat, or something mimicking one. Selous circled its far side, gaze fixed on the pulsing runes. "This was hidden for millennia," he said, "but not forgotten." Varen's voice was tight. "Who hides a relic of such magnitude beneath a frontier manufactorum?" This world was never a stronghold, never a center of any crusade. Kaler answered before I could. Because this vault predates the Imperium. His tone wavered, not with doubt, but with the weight of the realization. This was buried long before our kind raised banners on Terra, long before our legions were born. The present stirred, the pressure tightening in the back of my mind until the vault blurred and resolved into an image, a memory that did not belong to me. A frozen citadel under a sky of pale fire. A host of ancient warriors bearing the same runic armor, standing vigil around a structure identical to the casket before us. Their strength failing, their world dying, their oath enduring. And at the center of that vision, the kneeling warrior, unfrozen whole, helm bowed as the last of his brothers fell around him. The memory carried no grief, only duty, pure, absolute, unbroken. I staggered as the vision faded. The presence softened, as though steadying me. Kaler noticed. "Brother, what did it show you?" "A memory," I said quietly. "It's memory. This vault, this casket, it belonged to them, the warriors who came before." Selu's gaze hardened. "What lies within?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, it was meant to survive even when they did not." Kaler turned toward the kneeling warrior, who now stood at the chamber's threshold, watching with the patience of a sentinel carved from metal and silence. Frost drifted from its armor as if the very air recoiled from touching it. "It called us here for this," Kaler said. "Not for battle, not for salvation, for understanding." The presence pulsed approval. Kaler stepped closer to the casket. "Then we open it." A tremor rippled through the vault. The runes spiraling across the walls brightened, their shapes accelerating into frenzied patterns before locking into a new configuration. The casket responded. Its surface brightened. The hum intensified. My visor flickered again, the presence pressing tighter, warning, not against opening the casket, but urging preparation, bracing us for what would follow. Kaler placed his gauntlet upon the casket. "Brothers, stand ready." He applied pressure. The runes flashed. The casket split down the center with a hiss of frozen air escaping in a plume of pale mist. Inside lay, not a body, not a weapon, not a relic of forgotten gods, but a seed, a core of metal and ice, throbbing with a slow, steady light. Alive. The kneeling warrior stepped forward silently, its presence filling my mind with a single unmistakable meaning. The vigil is ending, and a second meaning directed at us. Yours is beginning. A cold breath shivered through the vault. Kaler whispered, almost reverently, "Emperor, preserve us." Not in fear, in understanding. This is why it called us. The presence resonated through the chamber, vast, ancient, calm as the deep void between stars. As the seed pulsed once, illuminating the vault with a radiance that felt like the heartbeat of something older than war, older than memory, older than mankind. The seed's light intensified slowly, steadily, like a star waking beneath ice. It pulsed with a rhythm that was neither biological nor mechanical, but something suspended between the two, a heartbeat sculpted into metal by a civilization that breathed duty as effortlessly as we inhale recycled air. Its glow washed across the vault walls, drawing new patterns out of the runes that had lain dormant for eons. Each pulse sent faint tremors through the steel of my armor, reverberating deep into bone as if seeking to match the cadence of my own twin hearts. Kaler stepped back as the mist cleared, revealing the core fully. Its surface was smooth, seamless, but I sensed no fragility. Rather, it felt as though it could endure the collapse of a world without cracking. Thin lines of pale energy ran across it like translucent veins, converging at a single point where the light burned brightest. Selous leaned forward slightly. "This thing, it's alive." "No organism," Varen countered, though even doubt wavered in his tone. "No machine spirit behaves like that either." A faint shiver ran along the chamber floor, a whisper of motion that did not belong to seismic rumble or structural strain. The presence sharpened, pressing close with an intensity that bordered on urgent anticipation. "It's not alive," I said slowly, "but it holds life, or memory of life. A fragment." Kaler turned toward me. "Explain." The presence guided my thoughts, shaping meaning out of sensation. Whatever these ancient warriors were, they did not rely on tombs or data vaults. They carried their legacy, their lineage, their history in these cores. When a warrior fell, the core was retrieved, safeguarded, passed on. Selu's voice rumbled. A repository of the dead. No, I said. Not the dead. The enduring. It was the best word the presence offered. Kaler circled the dais, visor fixed on the softly pulsing core. And this warrior, he waited to deliver it? For how long? The presence answered through a sudden chill. Ages. Cycles of frost and ruin. Until the world itself forgot his brothers' names. But he did not forget. He could not. His vigil was the final oath of a people swallowed by silence. The kneeling warrior moved closer, not threatening, but deliberate. The runes on its armor flared in response to the core's light, synchronizing into patterns that resonated through the chamber like harmonized echoes. Its weapon hummed softly, amplifying the pulse as though acknowledging the object's reawakening. Kaler's voice sounded hollow beneath the vault's rising hum. If this core contains anything of value, knowledge, history, then it belongs to the Imperium. We must secure it and deliver it to the Reclusium and the Librarium. The presence pulsed sharply. Not denial, not defiance. Warning. I felt the meaning crystallize in my mind. To remove the core without oath is to break the chain of vigil. Kaler stiffened. What does it mean? It must be claimed, I said. Accepted, not seized. Selous growled. We do not kneel to Xeno's relics. This isn't Xeno's, I replied, nor anything forbidden. It's something older than humanity, but not opposed to it. I swallowed, the presence lending certainty to each word. This was placed here for a successor, someone bound by duty, not blood. Kaler considered this, helm angled toward the warrior standing sentinel beside the dais. So it chose us. No, I said quietly. It chose its successor, and that successor stands among us. The vault dimmed, and all light converged toward me. Runic glow, core pulse, even the frost shimmering along the walls. The presence enveloped my thoughts, not consuming, not controlling, merely revealing truth with a clarity I could not resist. Selous took a step forward, voice low. Brother, what is it asking of you? I stared at the core as the pulse aligned with the rhythm of my twin hearts. It wants me to take the vigil, I whispered, to accept the burden its kind carried, to continue it as one of the Emperor's sons. Kaler turned sharply. You understand what you're saying? I do, I replied, and so does it. The presence pulsed again, solemn, steady, resolute, not urging, not demanding, inviting. Kaler faced the warrior, then the core, then me. His silence stretched long enough to feel like a judgment handed down by a pre-march. At last he spoke. Then step forward, brother. Claim what was kept for us in trust. The core brightened, its glow rising like a second dawn. The kneeling warrior stepped aside, and the presence settled fully upon my mind, no longer distant, now a mantle waiting to be accepted. I advanced toward the dais, the pulse deepening with each step. Each step toward the dais felt heavier than the last, not from fear, not from reluctance, but from the gravity of something vast and ancient settling across my shoulders like the slow descent of a mountain snowfall. The pulse of the core aligned with my heartbeat so completely that for a moment I could no longer distinguish where its rhythm ended and mine began. The chamber around us dimmed until only twin heart lights remained, the glow from the core, and the faint halo shimmering along the runes etched into the armor of the silent warrior who had guarded it for ages uncounted. Kaler stood behind me, his voice low and steady. Brother, move with intent. Whatever burden this is, you will not bear it alone. Selous and Varen formed a protective arc around the dais, their visors scanning the shifting runes along the walls, even as they kept half their attention fixed on me. They were ready, not merely to defend me, but to intervene if the core's light revealed itself as danger rather than destiny. That too was duty, but the presence in my mind was not hostile. It was waiting. As I reached the dais, the core brightened once more, soft at first, then in a brilliance that ran like molten silver across its veins. Frost lifted from its surface and dissolved mid-air. The air tasted metallic, cold, laced with a resonance that vibrated through bone and ceramite alike. My gauntlet hovered inches above the core, and in that breath of hesitation, a memory not my own shimmered across my vision. Not the frozen citadel this time. Not the final stand of ancient warriors. Something quieter. A hall of stone lit by flickering torchlight. Armored figures, those same runic warriors, kneeling in a circle. One warrior at the center, accepting the core not as a prize, but as a covenant. The others bowing their heads as the core bonded to the one chosen. Their vigil passed forward. Their legacy not ended, but transformed. A beginning shaped from an ending. The presence whispered, not in words, but in meaning shaped through feeling. As it was before, it becomes once more. My gauntlet descended. The moment my hand touched the core, the vault erupted with light. Not outward, inward. The pulse became a cascade, a torrent of radiance surging up my arm like liquid winter fire. It raced through my veins, into my hearts, into the labyrinth of augmentations and gene-crafted pathways that defined Astartes. Pain flashed, not burning, not crushing, but stretching, as though something was widening the bounds of perception, creating room for itself within the architecture of my mind. I staggered. Kaler moved to support me, but the kneeling warrior stepped between us, not threatening, but protective, holding Kaler back with a single lifted hand. The meaning was unmistakable. This passage must be walked alone. The light intensified until vision dissolved. I saw only fragments. Snow swirling into the heavens like rising embers. Shields locked in a formation older than the Imperium. A star collapsing in distant silence, while warriors stood unfaltering beneath its dimming glow. A world dying, a vow enduring. And then, the core spoke, not in language, not in sound, but in a truth that sank into every fiber of my being. Your vigil is not theirs. Your war is not theirs. But duty binds all who stand against the long dark. Take what remains. Carry what endures. Become the bridge between what was lost and what must be kept. The light faded. My vision cleared. I stood at the dais, one hand still resting on the core. Its glow had dimmed now to a soft, steady thrum. No longer searching, no longer wandering. It had found what it sought. Kaler stepped forward, visor angled sharply toward me. Brother, speak. What did it do to you? I lifted my hand. Light traced faint lines along the palm of my gauntlet, shimmering with the same runic pattern that decorated the ancient warrior's armor. They faded slowly, sinking into the plating as though absorbed into its structure. It didn't change me, I said, voice quieter than I intended. It joined me. Selous stiffened. Joined you, Varen murmured. Emperor's grace. Kaler's tone sharpened. Explain. I breathed in slowly. The presence was still there, no longer hovering behind thought, but integrated, a companion thread woven into the edges of my perception. Not invasive, not dominating. Watching, guiding, waiting. It carried the memory of a people who stood their last stand. I said, the echo of their purpose. And now that burden is passed to us. To me. Not as mastery or power. As obligation. Kaler weighed the words. Can you control it? It is not mine to command, I replied. Nor does it seek to command me. We coexist. Selous stepped forward with a low growl. What does it want now? The presence pulsed, steady, resolute. The answer formed in my mind with chilling clarity. It wants us to leave this vault, I said, because what followed us here is coming. The vault trembled. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The runes flickered like heartbeat stutters. Kaler's head turned sharply toward the entrance. Drakari. I shook my head. No. The presence surged, fearless, urgent. Something older. Kaler raised his bolter. Squad Primus, defensive formation. The kneeling warrior stepped forward as well. Its weapon hummed. Its runes flared. Our vigil had begun. The tremor deepened, rolling through the vault like distant thunder buried beneath mountains of stone. Dust cascaded from a ceiling in fine streams. The runes etched along the walls flickered in rapid succession, no longer in calm, rhythmic patterns, but in erratic bursts, as though the vault itself sensed a threat pressing against the edge of its ancient sanctity. The air thickened with a cold that was not the cavern's natural chill. It carried weight, intention, proximity. Kaler's voice was a sharpened blade. Squad Primus formed the iron crescent. We moved without hesitation, boots thudding against the cold metal floor as we locked into a defensive arc before the dais. Selous took the left flank. Bolter braced against his shoulder. Varen covered the right, sightlines overlapping with surgical precision. Kaler stood at the center, stance planted, Crozius raised like a promise carved into iron. And beside us, the ancient warrior stepped forward, runes blazing with cold fire. Its weapon resonated with a hum that deepened into the bones of the vault, harmonizing with the pulse of the core I had just claimed. Whatever approached, it stirred the Guardian as well. The tremor intensified. A fissure cracked across the far wall, glowing faintly from within. Varen's vox hissed in my ear. No seismic pattern matches that. No drilling. No explosive. Selous muttered. Then what in the Emperor's name is causing? The fissure erupted. A wave of pale, metallic shards burst outward like a blooming wound in reality. The shards hung suspended in the air, vibrating with high-frequency resonance that made my teeth ache even through my helm. They shifted, merged, and reassembled into a shape that towered above us, a silhouette forged from angular plates and deathly stillness. A machine? No, a construct. Its surface shimmered with a cold luminescence, runes crawling along its frame like living text. Its proportions were impossibly precise, as though carved from geometry itself. A presence emanated from it, not drifting, not searching, focused, cold, and predatory. Kaler whispered through clenched teeth. A Canoptech warden. Emperor preserve us. But even that felt insufficient. It was not Necron craft as we knew it. It was older, or altered, or awakened in a state that defied our lexicon of Xeno's lore. The presence within my mind flared, alarm, urgency, recognition, not of the construct, of the threat. The Guardian warrior stepped forward immediately, placing itself between us and the warden. Its runes ignited in a violent flash, casting long shadows across the chamber. For the first time, the construct moved. It did not step. It folded, shifting through space in a single silent flicker. One moment across the vault, the next within striking distance. A blade of refracted energy emerged from its arm, sweeping down in a killing arc aimed at the Guardian's helm. The Guardian intercepted. Steel met alien alloy in an impact that shook the dais beneath us. Light flared. Runes collided. The cavern roared with harmonics that sent fractures racing across the ceiling. Kaler barked, "Engage!" Bolter fire thundered. Our round streaked toward the construct, but each round struck an invisible barrier, dissolving into shards of distorted light. Shield. Varen growled. Adaptive multispectrum. Selous fired again, switching to penetration rounds. They sparked off the warden's carapace like raindrops off stone. The Guardian and the warden clashed again, their impacts sending shockwaves through the vault. The presence inside me surged, not in fear, but in clear intent. It pushed meaning through my mind. The core must not fall. The vigil must endure. I moved before I understood why. Kaler reached out to stop me, but the presence guided my steps, direct, unwavering. I grasped the core. Its surface was warm now, pulsing in time with the battle. The runes along its shell flared in resonance with the Guardian's armor. The warden sensed it. In a flicker of impossible speed, it disengaged from the Guardian and turned toward me, its body distorting into a razor-edged blur. Selous roared, "Brother down!" I did not move. The presence steadied my hands. The core brightened, blinding, and released a pulse of energy that struck the warden mid-stride. The construct collided with the far wall in a thunderous crash, its frame fracturing with the sound of breaking crystal. The Guardian surged forward, driving its blade into the construct's center. Runes exploded across the cavern in a cascade of cold fire. The warden spasmed once, twice, then collapsed into a heap of scattered, lifeless shards. Silence fell. Kaler lowered his crozier slowly. "By the Emperor we live." Selous exhaled a growl of disbelief. Brother, what did you do? I stared down at the core in my hands. Its light faded to a soft glow. No longer weapon, no longer storm, only purpose. It wasn't me, I said. The Guardian stepped toward us, slow, deliberate, and for the first time, bowed its helm. Kaler's voice softened to a reverent whisper. The vigil has passed. A pulse of warmth flowed from the presence into my thoughts. Quiet, solemn, final. The last keeper has found the next. The vault walls dimmed. The runes relaxed. The chamber breathed out a sigh centuries overdue. Kaler placed a hand on my shoulder plate. Brother, whatever burden you now carry, we bear it with you. You are not alone. Selous and Varen stepped closer, their stance becoming a shield of iron around me. One forged not by ritual, but by brotherhood. The Guardian turned, its armor dimming. The presence receded. Not gone. Never gone. But settled. Integrated. Waiting to be called upon in the long wars ahead. We ascended from the vault together, carrying the core through the silent corridors of the manufactorum ruins. The world above awaited ruins, echoes, and perhaps new threats. But for the moment, only the cold wind greeted us. Kaler spoke quietly as we emerged into the pale daylight. Your life before this moment is over, brother. You know this. Yes, I said. A new vigil begins. And for the first time since the fortress-monastery stone cradled my awakening, I understood the weight of that truth. Not as burden, as purpose. A space marine's life is war. But some wars are fought in silence. Some vows are carried alone. Some legacies must be borne across centuries. Yet I was not alone. My brother stood with me. The presence watched beside me. And somewhere in the void between stars, a forgotten lineage stirred. Its flame rekindled, its vigil entrusted to the Emperor's sons.